If he comes back over that rail again with those guns in his hand, I'm going to shoot him.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 51 of The Squad Room. I'm your host, Garrett Teslop. The Squad Room is the podcast for law enforcement officers and first responders who want to develop, maintain, and optimize their physical, mental, and emotional fitness. I'm an 11-year veteran of a sheriff's department here in Southern California, and The Squad Room is my journey as that veteran to try and stay healthy. In law enforcement, we are all tactical athletes, and my goal is to learn the best practices of experts and how I can apply them to my daily life. I'm out there looking for full force multipliers to take me to the next level. I talk to other cops, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, professional athletes, cardiologists, doctors, meditation experts, you name it, and of course some of the best strength and conditioning experts on the planet. Now, before we get into this episode, who my guest is today, I want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by Audible.com. You can get a free audiobook download and a free 30-day trial at audibletrial.com/The Squad Room. There are over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, your Android, your Kindle, or your MP3 player. If it's a slow shift or a long commute, audiobooks are a great way to stay alert and keep your mind engaged during some of the toughest hours. And even just signing up for the free trial helps really support the show. That's audibletrial.com/The Squad Room. For show notes and links to other items discussed in this episode, you can go to thesquadroom.net/episode 51. All right, so my guest this episode is someone who has become a friend of the show, an FOS, and a friend of mine. I consider him a friend over the last year or so. Sergeant Rick Burkmier of the Scottsdale Police Department in Arizona. Rick has been a super early supporter of the show. He's reached out early on, and we've kept in touch. And Rick even has his own podcast about fitness and health in law enforcement, called 40 Caliber Fitness, so you can search iTunes for that. I've actually been on his show, was a guest on his show, and was humbled to be asked to be on it. And we've conversed back and forth about a variety of topics, shared tips and tricks on podcasting, all that. But recently he shared a story with me that I asked if we could share on the show, and he agreed, and so he came on to talk about a shooting that he was involved in. So this is something that we'll be featuring more and more of throughout the upcoming episodes for the show, is a first-person narrative account of what it was like to go through some sort of critical incident, whether that's a shooting or an on-duty injury or response to an active shooter, major disaster kind of thing, that sort of stuff. I want to get perspective from all these other these different people. The goal of that is, of course, and something I hadn't mentioned in the intro, was that the Squad Room, part of our goal here is also to work on our leadership skills, mine included. And I've talked on this show before about how we are all leaders. All of us who wear a badge are de facto leaders in our community. And that doesn't mean that you need stripes or bars or stars to be a leader. There's plenty of guys on the front line and on line officers who are the leaders in their agencies, and also the leaders in their community. I don't have to give you too many detailed descriptions for you to think about how your community members look at you to solve problems, and they look at you as an example and as the lighthouse for their needs. So I want to talk about these stories not because they're salacious or because they'll boost ratings maybe or whatever, but the point is that if we can share these things that we've all been through, and if I can share something with someone in England, for example, who's listening, with somebody who went through an experience in Scottsdale, Arizona, that maybe we can help understand each other a little better. We can understand how our tactics are different. We can understand things to learn from someone else's experience, and so on. And to give you an example of that, I'll tell you a true story. In the time between when Rick and I recorded this episode and when I'm talking now and when this episode has been released, my department was involved in an officer-involved shooting. And in talking, I wasn't there, but many of the deputies that I would say that I am closest to were. And it was at my station. It was just happened that it was my night off. It was one of those things. It could have been my night, but it wasn't. And in talking with the deputies who were on scene or who actually were involved in this, I reached back to my conversation here with Rick, and I pulled bits from our conversation and shared some of that with them. And it directly benefited my ability to relate to them, to remind them about the importance of their sleep and that it's okay if they're going to have mental thoughts of this for a while, and that's normal. And I don't know if I would have thought of that necessarily in the moment talking to them had I not just had this conversation with Rick. So that's an exact example of why I want to do this and why I want these kinds of episodes to be out there, so that we can all learn tips, tactics, training, briefing materials for all this sorts of stuff. So if you have a story you want to share, you can send me a quick email at garrett@thesquadroom.net. Would love to hear from you, and would love to feature some more of these types of stories. And let me know if you think you have any comments or questions about what we talk about here today. But my guest, Sergeant Rick Burkmier, Scottsdale PD. Sergeant Rick Burkmier, Scottsdale PD, welcome to the Squad Room.
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Now, if anyone happens to recognize your voice, they might also listen to your own podcast, 40K.
Yeah, I think I'm the only one that listens to it and just downloads it over and over again to pad my stats.
Well, Sergeant Burkmier here has been one of the very earliest supporters of the Squad Room, someone who reached out early on, threw a lot of support our way, a lot of encouraging words, and eventually started your own podcast and called 40 Caliber Fitness.
Yep. Which
I've been a guest on. Thank you. That was always fun. So this is an experience to turn the tables and share with you. And as I said, you were an early supporter, and one of those ways that you supported was I recently, sent out an email to our tribe asking for people who are willing to share their stories about an on-duty critical incident of some sort, whether that was a response to a major disaster, an officer-involved shooting, a medical issue on duty. And you responded and told a great story about an event that you were involved in. So I want to get to that, and that's going to be the purpose of our talk today, is talking about your trip into the kill zone.
Sure.
But I always like to ask other cops when I get them on the show or when I see them in person. I want you to tell me about why you decided to become a cop in the first place.
It was something that was in the back of my mind, not really in the forefront when I was in college, and kind of thought about it. Wasn't sure what I was going to do. At the time, my dad worked for Honeywell, worked on jet engines, and I had worked summers there, and got a job there after college. And it was really kind of unfulfilling. And I thought, what am I going to do? When I look back on my life when I'm 50, what am I going to say, and what kind of impact will I have? And that the thought kind of started pushing to the forefront of my mind. And a buddy of mine that's co-hosted on our podcast, my friend Big Dave, he said, "Hey, I just tested I'm going to test for Phoenix PD." Like, hey, I've been thinking about it, and it's kind of been running in the back of my mind. And then September 11th happened, and I tested. That was on a Tuesday. I tested that Saturday, and went through the process. Ended up getting an offer from Phoenix, an offer from Tempe PD, and I was in another couple processes, and then I accepted with Tempe PD, and then it just hit me that I don't know if I'm ready for this, and I chickened out and withdrew. And sat on it for a little bit longer, and then the following year, just the timing was right, and did a lot of soul searching. It was like, this is what I need to do, and tested with Scottsdale, and as they say, the rest is history.
That's interesting that you had a moment of self-doubt there. What was it that you were worried? How old were you, and what made you think that you weren't prepared for this?
I was 25, and so I ended up getting hired by Scottsdale and starting when I was 26. But 25, man, I didn't even start feeling like a grown-up until I was probably 33, 34. Yeah. And I mean, I was just a kid that I lived at home when I played, or when I was in college and played football, just because my focus was on trying to graduate, and they were gracious enough to let me just focus on school and football at the time. And I moved out of my house, or I moved out of my parents' house and moved into my own house like 3 months before September 11th. So I'd been on my own for 3 months supporting myself, and then decided, well, I'm going to take this big undertaking. And I don't know. I just kind of chickened out, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for this, and I'm not going to get involved with it until I know in my heart of hearts that I'm ready to face these things. So took a year of some, just kind of looking in the mirror and, okay, I'm ready. And and just went from there.
I had an interesting, similar situation. I didn't start until I didn't get an offer until I was 27, and I had started the process about the same time, about 25.
Yeah.
And I was working in the film and music industry. I was a marketing executive, and I had that same crisis of confidence, you could call it.
Yeah.
But I was already in the academy, and actually it was the first day. So I remember the first day of the academy having that same thought. And
I almost made it there. We had a meeting at like Tempe PD like on a Wednesday or Thursday, and we were supposed to start that following Monday. Mm-hmm. So I actually met the other guys I was supposed to go to the academy with, and it hit me right then. I'm like, I'm not ready for this right now. 25. I mean, what do you know? You're a kid.
Oh, totally. And it's only with hindsight I think you realize that in some ways too. I realized I'd lived this kind of cushy life with no discipline and no needed discipline. There was nobody holding over me to make me do the right thing or follow the right path. And I realized at 27 on day one of the academy that I had probably just made a horrible mistake. Luckily, it all worked out
real quick.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I didn't have anything to fall back on. I'd already quit my job. I'd quite literally probably burned those bridges by just applying for a law enforcement position to begin with. So it's not like I could just go back on Tuesday and be like, oh, never mind, guys. I was kind of stuck there. And luckily, I think being between a rock and a hard place in my events was, was a good thing. I learned a lot out of it. But so you took a year. You eventually ended up with Scottsdale. What was it though that you were looking for in law enforcement that you weren't finding in the private sector? What would you say when you 50 you wanted to look back and see what you contributed? What was it that you were hoping to contribute?
Just make a difference to one person, to 5 people, to 20 people, to whatever it was. That was, my dad served in the Marine Corps in Vietnam, and he was a firefighter in Michigan before we family moved out to Arizona. And there was always just something about that service that kind of stuck in the back of my head that I need to be doing something better. I tried to play football in college and played a couple years in junior college, and then walked on at Arizona State. And football was cool, but I wasn't good enough to keep going. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't the way I wanted to kind of make a mark. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to be able to go to bed at the end of the day and know that something I did was worthwhile to somebody. And I don't know, just kind of that whole, you want to do what you can in your community.
Sure.
I thought that I could make a bigger difference here than, joining the military, because I considered that, like I'm sure a ton of people did after September 11th. And I just figured that, this is a way to make a bigger impact at home.
Mm-hmm. Again, I had the same experience. I spent several years after 9/11 thinking about what I should be doing, and having that quandary, and realizing that military wasn't for me, but that I could probably provide more value in law enforcement.
Yeah.
So you're in Scottsdale. Describe Scottsdale to people that aren't from Arizona. What's the size of the city? You're right outside. You're in the Phoenix area, yeah?
Yeah. East Valley, just east of Phoenix. We are a long, skinny city. I think I want to say like at least 45 miles long.
Oh, wow.
We have 4 districts now, and they're very different from each other. They're very unique unto themselves. Our southern districts we run right into Tempe. We're just north of Arizona State. You can hear the fireworks from the football game from the station. I work out of our southern district. Our District 2 is a huge nightlife. We're probably the biggest nighttime entertainment district in the West outside of Las Vegas. Tons and tons of bars and restaurants and events. Last time the Super Bowl came into town, I think there were 30 or 40 sanctioned events by the NFL, and all but 3 of them were hosted in Scottsdale.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, ESPN came, I think when they were here, what was it, like 08? When the Super Bowl was here, ESPN came and they set up and broadcasted for a week. And District 3 is mostly residential as you go further north, and then District 4 has Westworld, where we host Barrett Jackson, and we just finished hosting the Phoenix Open, the Waste Management Phoenix Open golf tournament. So, yeah, special events. We're in the special event season now, and it's huge.
So what's your population?
I think it's right around 225,000 or something like that, 250,000.
So it sounds
basically, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, like a pretty good sized city on top of having all of the business and retail and entertainment lifestyle events.
Yeah, and then there's the Scottsdale Airport, and there's the air park has a ton of businesses up north, and that kind of brings its own unique problems just with traffic, and then bad guys at night, snooping around down there trying to break into businesses, and they're all the districts they're similar but different. Every place has their problems, and we're no different. So it's a lot of transient folks kind of coming in with the bars and traffic in the air park and that kind of stuff.
And what's the population of the greater Phoenix area?
We're like I think I read Phoenix is like the 6th biggest metro area in the country.
I don't believe it. I'm just trying to give people
Chicago,
that picture.
LA,
You've got
Miami, DC, New York, Chicago.
You've got because you've got. Tempe's a big city. Scottsdale's a good sized city. Phoenix is huge, and you've also got. Phoenix is a stronghold of the cartels.
Yeah.
In terms of drug trafficking and all that too. So there's a lot of action basically going on in that area, and lots of gangs and those sorts of issues. Does Scottsdale have a gang issue?
Not necessarily. We don't have like a homegrown gang issue. There's some, there's a couple cliques here and there, and it was worse a while ago. But especially with the bars, and I haven't worked nights in a couple years now. But I spent majority of my career working that area when I was an officer, and then I went back to it right after I promoted. So there's a lot of kind of transient gang activity that will come through, depending on the nightclub and depending on the promoter. And so we're pretty good about. We had a lot of directed activity that we would just, basically, hey, this weekend is this club, and somebody litters, they're going to jail. And, noise ordinance, we have noise ordinance for car stereos at the certain distance and how loud it can be and all that kind of stuff. And, it's a quality of life issue for the hotels and stuff down there. And, we were pulling guns and dope. And like I said, it's just like pretty much anywhere else, but the nightclub kind of sucks those folks in on Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Totally does, yeah. What are some of the assignments you've had during your time?
I've been pretty straightforward. I worked patrol for 5 or 6 years. Went and spent a year in ISB. That was not my cup of tea. I am not suited to sitting in the office and working caseload.
What's ISB?
Our Investigative Services Bureau. I was an auto crimes detective, and not to toot my own horn or anything, but I was probably one of like the bottom third detectives. Like I made a couple cases, but I was not very good at it. It was not a good match. So I came back to the road, and I've been a firearms instructor since I think 08 or 09, a rifle instructor since 09 or 10, been a fitness instructor, and I was pretty heavily involved in teaching before I promoted. And I promoted January of 2011, and I've been on patrol. I worked weekend midnights downtown, and then weekend kind of mid-watch, and now I'm down in our southern district on day shift.
So you mentioned getting promoted in 2011. So when you got promoted, like before you got the stripes, or before you went out that first night or first day of patrol as a sergeant, what did you think was going to be the hardest part of the job of being a sergeant, being a supervisor?
A lot of it. I've told plenty of people in our department that I think that there's a supervision, leadership, and management are 3 completely unique and different things.
Absolutely.
And we run into the problem not just in law enforcement, but everywhere of using those terms interchangeably. Mm-hmm. It happened when I was at Honeywell. I see it elsewhere outside of law enforcement, and so I thought that was going to be a big thing, that you can be a really good leader and a poor manager. You can be a good manager and a good supervisor, but a poor leader. So I thought kind of one of the biggest issues was going to be kind of marrying all 3 of those. And the other one was, I had been an officer for 8 years, and now to be a supervisor of guys that were senior to me by 10 years. Mm-hmm. That was going to be an issue. It changes. I mean, you try to say that you're not going to change as a supervisor, but you're going to, and in your heart of hearts, you can still be the same person and still stand for the same things, but some things do have to change. Like when you're an officer, you can go out to choir practice after work and go have beers with your buddies. But the supervisor, you can stop by for a beer, but then you got to leave. It's a different dynamic, because I can't go. Not that I've been drunk in the last 15 years, because God, I couldn't handle it. But you can't go get hammered with somebody and then have to write them an investigation and give them discipline the next week. So there has to be that line. So I thought that was going to be real interesting to figure out, like with your buddies especially, like how the line worked and how those relationships stayed, how they changed, and how you try to keep the good parts good. And so far I work with some good folks, man. So everybody's taking pretty good care of me, and we have pretty good staff, and we have pretty good officers, and it's just worked.
Yeah. I totally agree with you that the supervision, management, and leadership are three entirely different things. You're 100% dead on too. I think that they get mixed up, they get intertwined, they get confused. What's frustrating sometimes too, like I'm sure you probably experience this, like they get confused from above you too. So they might be confusing your leadership with your management or your supervision and trying to keep those things separate. But and you're right. I think you're always the same person when you promote, but you do have to you have to change your relationship with people. Like you say, you can't be that.
Not everybody's the same person, though. I've seen, and I've been upfront about this too. I don't think this is going to be a surprise to anybody listening from my department, but I've seen people that have promoted, and when they decide they want to promote, and they change, and their relationships change, and how they treat people changes. And I tell people, I don't know why, but people come to me for advice for the sergeant process, and I tell them, be you. Either get hired for being you or not hired for being you, but be able to look yourself in the mirror. I've seen people and I've heard what they have done, and who they talk to, and how they, their plan, and how they associated themselves with certain people to get promoted. And I'm like, that wasn't you 6 months ago. So, everybody at work calls me Burke, and I have been Burke from day one. I stand by my ideals, and I try to at least be respectful, and sometimes I'm blockheaded, and sometimes I have to eat my words, and I'm okay with that, because I'm passionate about what I think, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, man. I'll own it, and I've had to own it a couple times, and it sucks, but it's better to say, hey, you know what, I was wrong on this, and my bad.
Yeah. Well, I think when you encounter the people you were just describing that changed, there was one of two things going on. Either that was actually them, and they were playing possum, or wolf in sheep's clothing, so to speak. Or they weren't prepared for the job mentally, and again, we talk about crisis of confidence. They collapse internally, and they fall back on what they think a leader, manager, a supervisor should be, and they always are going to probably gravitate towards those negative examples. Because if you're gravitating towards the positive examples, I think you have confidence in yourself, and you know the difference.
Yep.
You know what I mean? All right. So anyway, there's a lot to take on as a new sergeant, right? I mean, it's like you just said, we just chatted about some of the bigger issues, but there's lots of different stuff that goes into being a new sergeant. And but there's also a lot of great things. What's your favorite thing about being a sergeant? And maybe also, is it different, from when you first got promoted to now? Has that changed, or is it what's your favorite thing?
There's a couple. There are some things that I liked when I first promoted that. Let me rephrase that. There are certain things now that I couldn't have seen when I first promoted. Like, so now I have a couple of my guys that have worked on my squad that have one. I share an office with them. He was my OIC on my very, very first squad, and he just promoted within the last year. So kind of seeing that, and seeing the stuff that I have been able to glean from other people, and and learn on podcasts like yours, and the folks that you've been able to talk to, and kind of share that with my team, and leaders that I've worked with that I've really respected, that I've taken on kind of some of their ideals, or really identified with it and pass it on. It's cool to see somebody else when kind of the light clicks and they're like, yeah, you put that into words, or you're able to have a conversation and briefing about, I'm passionate about carrying your gun off duty, and not every cop does. But when you start talking about, hey, why? Tell me why you don't, and tell me why you do, and you kind of see that light go on when people start, looking at different perspectives. I'm not necessarily trying to change your mind. I'm just telling you this is what the argument is. Mm-hmm. So it's cool to see. It's cool to see a team come together and stop caring about themselves kind of individually, and it's amazing how much can get accomplished when you don't care who gets the credit, and when you get 5, 6, 7 guys and gals that are on board with that, you wreck shop. I mean, we go out and, folks that need warnings get warnings, folks that get tickets, and folks that need to go to jail, they go to jail. Mm-hmm. And that's just, it's really cool to see, a squad, squad unity. I've been on some broken squads before, and it's, all of my squads have been, I've had the fortune of working with some really good people throughout my career, some of the best squads I've ever been on. And it's cool. That's probably the best thing, is having, that kind of single-minded focus where everybody's on the same page and we all kind of see things the same way. What's important, what's kind of the small stuff, and, bigger picture, because it's not about us. I mean, we don't take this job to be rich. We take this job to make a difference. And, it's cool when you hear about one of your guys telling you about what one of your other guys did, that they won't take the credit for it. Mm-hmm. So, hey, so-and-so, he sat with me for 8 hours today and showed me how to run pawn history, and, showed me how to change my submittal forms, and showed me how to do this and that. But that officer will never take credit for it, because he's like, quiet professional. That's just what I'm supposed to do. Right. So
right.
That's cool stuff.
All right. So you're 6 months into being a sergeant, still new to the job, right? 6 months. Yeah. Tell me about the day of June 10th, 2011. What were you doing that day?
It was actually in particular right around that time. That was getting towards the end of my shift. We worked until 7 o'clock in the morning, and I remember everything about that morning. I remember talking with my boss. He had gone off duty and came in, and we were talking about some paperwork stuff. And I was sitting at my desk, and I had an officer at the time that was having some just some troubles being an officer. Just, officer safety was a huge concern. And so I heard her go out on a call, and I'm like, I'm not doing anything else. I need to get out of the office. So I swung by that stop and, talked to her, and things were good, and drove around the, city for a few minutes, and I'm going to head back to the station and finish this paperwork. And 2 of my cops went to a 911 check welfare at a hotel.
All the units for 911 check welfare, beat aid 5101 North Scottsdale Road at the Clarion Hotel, room number 2043.
Like, I'm just going to swing by there. I'm close. So I go and sat in the parking lot, and I ended up calling. He was actually a buddy of mine before I promoted. He had more time on than I did. And so called him on the phone, and kind of got the rundown of, what this guy's doing, and they weren't really able to make contact. And
we have an open line. On callback, the front desk employee said that it came from the room number 2043. Have not been able to actually get through to the room at 438.
As I'm sitting in my truck on the phone with Jason, I hear gunshots go off, and I hear him yell, "Oh shit." And I dropped my phone, bailed out of my truck, and ran, and went, "Dear God, I have 6 months on. What in the hell am I getting into?"
Correct, and send people here, 2043.
All units, 1M6 calls 998 5101 North Scottsdale Road, room number 2043. PD1 is restricted.
Hey, where's the room from your car?
I actually remember thinking that, like, here we go, pucker factor.
So this is at the Clarion Motel at the corner of Scottsdale and Orange Blossom, right?
5101 North Scottsdale Road. It's Days Hotel now.
Days Hotel. So explain the layout, of the tactical layout of this hotel or motel for the audience, please.
Yeah, so it's wasn't even Orange Blossom. I think it's Chaparral. It's the northeast corner, and huge. So you go northbound at northeast corner, you turn into a parking lot. There's kind of a restaurant, front office, and then the northern bank of buildings is 2-story, like 60s or 70s construction, like block and concrete. And I just ran into the courtyard. I had no idea where they were, and I still remember the room. It was 2043, So I run into the courtyard as I'm 20 yards away, 30 yards away from my truck. I remember kind of stopping and slowing down, going, should I go back for my rifle? But I need to get to them. But should I go back for my rifle? And then I saw my cops, and we touched base real quick and made sure that we were good. And looking at this giant complex, I'm like, okay, there's 3 of us and everybody's coming. We should probably get eyes on the door.
I need units from D3. I need units from D1. He shot round outside of his room, 2 rounds, outside of his room at our officers. So we're on the northeast side. We can get people to go from the south on the east, long guns and helmets, and then we'll figure out what we have.
So, well, I can kind of fill in the blanks because we obviously know what happened now, but this guy who ended up being, and I'm not going to say his name because he doesn't deserve it, but drunk, high on meth. He goes to the hotel, asks to get put into a room. They put him in this room. And for whatever reason, he said that he was, and we found this out later after, because he didn't end up dying in the process. So once they had sentencing, he wanted to talk to the 2 officers that were involved, and they were game for it. And he basically told them that his voices told him that he needed to kill a pure soul. So he goes into this room. He had 2 stolen guns from his family, and he barricaded himself in the very back of this room and called 911, called the front desk and said there was a bomb in his phone, and just a lot of gibberish. It was, everybody gets those kind of calls, somebody that's, schizophrenic or hearing things. And so you go and see what you can do. But
so it was an ambush. Straight up ambush.
And it was, June in Arizona, and it's 5:00 in the morning. It was still, like 100 degrees. So the air conditioner's blowing. So, so the door faces north on the second level of this building, and it's a steel door, thank God. And I think it was to the right or the left of it, one side of it was glass and curtains are drawn. So my guys go up there and they're knocking on the door, and they could hear him talking, but they couldn't figure out what he was saying. So I don't know whether it was, and I won't give their last names, but Jason or Allison, I don't know which one of them decided that, hey, we're going to stand away from the window on the other side of the door where there's block, but they were, leaning in to try and hear this guy. And he, I don't know how many rounds were fired, but he started sending rounds through the door and the window.
And confirming, he shot rounds at us through the room, so we have not fired back.
And the door caught the rounds, and then the ones that obviously hit the window went through. And Allison got on the air, and I don't know if you've listened to the audio yet, but she got on the air and said 998, and they booked it. They retreated down to the courtyard where I met them, and we were only down there for literally 10 seconds and made sure that we were all okay and tried to put a plan together quickly. But yeah, it's a big complex.
So you backed off the room. By that time, you met them down there on the first floor.
Yeah.
You kind of mentioned what you remember thinking about when you were running to the room, and the kind of acknowledgement of the pucker factor there.
Yeah.
Once you got to your guys, what was your thought process?
Initially, once I found out they were okay, my thought process, we need to lock this down and get these folks and the surrounding rooms out of them, because I didn't realize at the time that place is built like a bunker. So my thought was, well, if he starts firing rounds, through drywall, or what if he kicks in another door? So I sent Jason and Allison back off to the north side, and they were kind of northwest of the room where they were behind a car and they had eyes on it. I got up to the second level to the southern side of the building, because figured if he got out of that room and he could go south, we didn't have any containment. It was just the 3 of us. So at least we had both sides, visually we could figure out if they could see if he left the room and I could see if he moved south. And I was trying to direct units in, but we had, there's another hotel at 5001 Scottsdale Road and then 5101 Scottsdale Road. And that got confused in a hurry. So, so I got on the air, and you can hear it in the audio that my voice is, it's amped, and trying to get resources from all the other districts. And, I tried to get radio to get these folks to evacuate and run towards me, run away from that room so they didn't cross the threshold where he had already fired off some rounds. That was my biggest concern immediately was getting those folks out and then trying to hold him into a room. But yeah, I had no idea. Like I said, 6 months on, and one of my guys ended up coming up with me, and he was kind of stacked over the top of me. We're looking down this hallway, and I looked to him and I said, I have no idea how the hell we're going to lock down this entire hotel.
1071, I left my long gun in the truck, so I need a long gun up here, a long gun on the south if we can get a position where we can get eyes on, and a long gun to the back.
And so did the rooms open into a courtyard?
Or
were they
southern
hallways?
side of that building. So think of a big rectangle. So the inside of the rectangle opened into the courtyard. Mm-hmm. The outside of the rectangle opened out to the parking lot. And he was on the outside, the very, very north side. And so, yeah, I was trying to work through it. And I remember there's something that clicked that, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but at some point I just got on the air and took a deep breath and said, okay. And then just started, I need these people here, I need these people here, and tried to get a hold of the lieutenant who was way up in our North District, and he was coming down.
And confirming he shot rounds at us through the room, but we have not fired back. We got additional shots fired.
10-4. More shots fired.
All right, is he shooting out of the back window?
He's shooting from the room right now. It appears to be going through the door.
Okay. Patrol 44, unless you have an issue, I want everybody that we have down here now because I'm not sure how we're going to contain this if he keeps firing from this fortified position.
And just tried to do the best we can with what we had. And the situation moved quick, so we didn't really have to stay still for long.
What were your priorities at that point once you'd gotten eyes on the front door?
Again, my priorities were what I was thinking was that we needed to get people evacuated, and then we didn't have any long guns. And this was a long hallway, and there was no way we didn't know what or I didn't know what the immediate area around his room was. He ended up being like 2 feet from the walkway in a stairwell. If you walk out of his room, you could turn to the right and either continue eastbound, or you could walk right down the stairwell and get to the ground. I knew it was around there somewhere, but I didn't exactly know. So I was trying to get at least coverage to the south. So if he did come out, we could have, we could at least have some kind of perimeter. And then my officer that came up with me, he asked me if I wanted my rifle. And so I gave him my keys and said, yep, go get my gun, come back here. So at least I knew we had long guns coming, but we didn't have any there. So yeah, my first priority was trying to get those folks evacuated, which looking back on it maybe wasn't the best thing on how secure that construction was. And then getting coverage on the room and then getting long guns up.
Even with 250,000 people in your population,
yeah.
A full-time SWAT team is probably unrealistic, right? So what sort of resources did you have available to you at that moment?
We have a full-time element, our special assignments unit, and they're always on call. And then our decentralized guys are on call. And then we have, there's some kind of, we have some gear in the supervisor trucks, and then we have our rifle program. So we have, officers and detectives that aren't necessarily SWAT, but do get advanced training with a 40-hour rifle school and then quarterly ranges, and we do building entries and that kind of stuff. So they're a little bit more proficient than just what you would actually go through with a pistol, just because you're doing that many more reps. But
so not every officer carries an AR.
No, not every officer. I think right now, I've been out of the program for a while just because how bad my knees have been, but and I haven't taught in a while just because I haven't been able to get away from with coverage. But last I thought we had maybe 100, and that's throughout the department, 100, 125, including our street crimes unit, our narcs unit, 100, 125 rifles for a department of 400, not including the SWAT guys.
So access to rifles, it can be spotty. What about air support?
Nope.
And then you said your tactical units, they're on call, but at 5 a.m, they're not roaming around. What?
Right.
How many patrol guys could you pull at that moment?
I think I had 4 from my district. We had, our minimums from about 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning till 11. Our minimums per district are 4 officers. For some reason, we had day shift was coming in early, and I don't remember. I don't remember why. I know those guys came in early, some of them, and they just loaded up and went. And then, being that time of day, we had some detectives that were just on their way to work. So I knew we had at least a couple districts of people coming, the Southern District and a couple Northern. I think I just asked for everybody.
I'm sure.
Anybody that has a gun, come on down and we'll figure out where to put you.
Come and play.
Like I said, at that moment, I was puckered, man.
And this is about 5 a.m?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're set up on the hotel room, and this guy who's already called in an ambush on you. He's still inside the room. Your officers weren't righteously so, didn't return fire into the room. Is that correct?
Correct, because they had no idea.
Right, you don't know who else is in there and who he's with, any of those things. So you back off. You set up on the room. You are now the only person on the second floor as your other officer runs to get your rifle. Right. And you have other elements on the ground floor. Are they near that stairwell where he could have accessed? Yeah, there was one other officer that ended up coming up there. Okay. And I think can't remember how quickly she got set, but she got there and started getting around that stairwell on the ground level. And right around that time, after I sent Paul to go get my gun, my rifle, I hear Allison and Jason down on the ground level just start giving commands.
He just exited. He's out on the balcony right now. Get cover, give commands, and get him to stay there. How are you guys? Horse 5, give him commands.
So I was on kind of the southern side of that bank, and then I moved to the northern side and rolled the corner, and bad guy had exited the room and started coming westbound towards me, but by the time I had turned the corner, I saw his back, and he was running back towards his room, and Allison and Jason were further away than me. They were giving commands, and he was not listening. So he came out of the room originally and then fled back in? No, he was barricaded in the room for a while, and this was, like I said, a matter of minutes from the time the shots were fired to the time he poked out of the room. So he came out, started coming westbound. I rolled the corner, saw him. He went back east and then kind of crouched down. So, on the second level of like every hotel ever made that has outdoor hallways, they have like that big rail, that big metal rail. So he kind of came back to where in front of his room and kind of crouched down like a catcher would, like in a squat. And so he was kind of bobbing up and down, and it looked like he was, trying to get a bead on where Jason and Allison were. And they were, like I said, back to my left. And they were quite a ways away, but, bad guys, they get lucky. Yeah. So I could see he had a gun in each hand, and I set in my mind, I'm like, okay. And it's crazy because I talked about it before with, I did one briefing training on this, and some people that have asked me, like, this was a much different shooting than some other people have had in our department that were very close, very fast guys, fighting for guns, somebody running up behind him with a pipe. Very, very different. I remember thinking, okay, if he comes back over that rail again with those guns in his hand, I'm going to shoot him. And he made a bad decision and decided. I watched it, and it happens. The slow motion happens. So he started to stand up and bring both guns over the rail. And I had my pistol with me. I took already out on him, and I didn't give any commands because Jason and Allison were. And I took a deep breath, and I was like, holy crap, I'm actually going to shoot this guy.
998, he's still on his feet. North side landing.
And fired 4 rounds and ended up being 46 yards. And so he's a skinny tweaker, 6'1", like 150, bladed off. And I hit him 1 out of 3. And last I went up to that hotel, you could see the group in the stucco. So hit him once. He dropped dropped both guns, and then ran down that stairwell. And I remember right after that, like couldn't have been a couple seconds, Paul comes over, and I just see my rifle magically appear over my shoulder. And I was, oh man. So we said, we're on the move. So I'm trying to call out directions and where he went.
Come on, he's on the run, going east. Black hat, great sweatshirt, going into cover. Guys, stay behind that car. He has the gun. Stop. The gun is up here. I'm pretty sure I hit.
he ended up hitting, got down on the ground level and started heading east. So we stayed on the second level and had like an overwatch. And at this point, the cavalry was coming in. So we had a couple other sergeants that were coming in and directing traffic, and we had a ton of cops that were coming in on foot. And he ended up being, hang on, motorcycle. He ended up kind of hunkering down in like a little construction area that was east of the hotel. And so the cops and cavalry came, and he proned out, and they took him into custody and took him to ambulance took him to the hospital.
So this is something I think that's always interesting. Is so he gets one in the upper torso from you, mm-hmm. and still doesn't give up his fight. Right? He flees. Yeah, he gets a couple hundred yards away and he runs. Yeah, and there's some discussion. The sergeant that was in our violent crimes unit at the time, he tried to tell me that I missed and that ricocheted off the rail because I guess they ended up finding part of the round or something. But then one of the crime scene guys told me that the reason that the round didn't expand is because of the hollow point was filled up with he had a hoodie on and filled up with that, so it hit him but didn't do as much damage as it would have. And plus, from 46 yards away, I mean, with a pistol, you're bleeding off a lot of force as opposed to shooting him from 4 yards away. So I don't know. I didn't miss him, so I don't believe what they said, but there's no way. That would be an awful shot. There's no way that I missed, from 46 and hit a rail and it ricocheted like that when you could see the group and the stucco. So yeah, he took one to the chest and ended up running, and it wasn't until he saw all his blood when he kind of stopped, and wasn't until then that he gave up. So, suspect's in custody at this point. Yep. You're the sergeant who typically is in charge of getting everybody grouped together, figuring out who's shot, getting the exigency questions answered. Except in this instance, it's you. So what happens? What happens next? It actually worked pretty fluidly. The lieutenant that I was on the air with as we were trying to get this thing figured out in the beginning, he ended up coming down, and he took over that whole process because he came down by the time I think he got there either right before or right after dude got in custody. And there was a couple of the day shift sergeants that had come on. Detectives were already showing up. So and then my boss didn't go to sleep that night because somebody called him. It was a couple hours after I had talked to him. Somebody called him, and he came back. So he ended up hanging out with me, being assigned to me, and took me up to where our investigative folks are housed for the interview. And it just moved really, really quickly. So as soon as he was in custody, everybody figured out, so, okay, well, this sergeant's involved. So they broke it up quick. And, it's not like we're not a super small agency like that might get into a shooting once every 10 years. I think we've averaged, a couple a year for the last however many years, couple three. So, our folks are pretty squared away, so they jumped on it pretty quick. And I think they had the command post set up, I don't know, within a half hour, 45 minutes. So what was the your first moment alone, or where you had a chance to regroup on your own thoughts? What went through your mind? The biggest thing, and one of the things that I tell people that nobody really talks about in police training, they may, but not any training that I've been to. And I've been able to find kind of articles and stuff here and there. The adrenaline dump, if you think you've had an adrenaline dump before, like somebody almost hits you in a car and all that kind of stuff, it was nothing. I mean, this whole incident from the time that guy shot at my guys to the time that we had him in custody was about 12 minutes. And so me and Jason and Allison kind of linked up right after we had the cops coming to the east side of the hotel. So I got down off the second level. We kind of linked up and were like the trail search team, and then figured out that, they had him. So we kept pushing up until the guy was in handcuffs. And then after that, the dump is absolutely unreal. Like there's nothing you can do to prepare for that. Like maybe some of these guys, like, like Andy Stump, the guy that does the, the wingsuits and, military guys. Yeah, it's probably another day in the life for them. But I'd never been in a gunfight before.
And so for that was something else.
What
and
was
then,
it?
You know,
physiologically, what happened?
Man, I just got this overwhelming, everything was like super, super tense. And then this overwhelming kind of sense of relief. And then it feels like you're electric, like my skin was on fire, and it just felt weird. I mean, I don't think I could stand still, and kind of fidgeting and all that kind of stuff. And, my guys were there with me, and you're not supposed to talk about what happened because, obviously you want to preserve the interviews and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just happy everybody was alive. But that was the first thing. And then, like I said, since it wasn't kind of like the normal, I don't want to say the normal shooting, but like some of the shootings that we've had, and I've read about like the super close, tight quarters and all that. I actually remember after that, I remember going, I didn't really hear the rounds. That was kind of cool. So, yeah, it was just, your mind kind of wanders. It was just kind of weird.
Did you ever, and I'm trying to ask this question the right way, but I mean, in hindsight, with all the information you just told us, everything about that is a good shoot. Was there ever a moment in that rush and in that adrenaline rush in the seconds afterwards, did you doubt yourself?
No, never. I knew when the second that I saw him that I was going to end up shooting him. I was the only one that was in position. He still had guns. I knew that was going to happen. I mean, not for a second did I doubt myself. I mean, that was the first time that I've been in that situation physically, but that wasn't the first time I've been in that situation mentally. And that's something that I tell my guys all the time. Like, the first time you encounter something shouldn't be when you're standing there. And somebody brought it up to me when I was in training, and I liked the way they brought it. So, randomly I'll ask some of my guys in briefing, I'm like, hey, how many times has that Circle K been robbed, or that convenience store been robbed this month? And they were like, none. Like, that thing's been robbed every time I've driven by it this month. Because when I drive by, I'm thinking, okay, if the hot tone kicks out right when I'm driving by, what am I going to do?
Yep.
And so, you try and kind of mentally prepare for as many situations as you can think of. So when you're in that situation, it's not a complete culture shock, because your heart rate is going to get jacked. And like I said, I listening to the audio afterwards, I'm like, man, I was amped. But I was still you could tell I was amped, but I was still trying to be calm, because calm is contagious. And if I'm screaming on the air as the boss, man, everybody else is going to freak out too. But if I can get on with my best pilot voice, even though I may be freaking out inside, then, people are going to stay within their means while they're driving to the scene. And
right.
Nobody's going to wreck and, do something stupid. And, we're all going to get there.
I think you just hit on something that's extremely important, and I hope that any cop out there and any supervisor reiterates to their people, is that idea that the first time you go through something physically shouldn't be the first time you go through it mentally. I think that's fantastic advice. So you do your interview, you go home. Now you've got a whole court process to go through with this idiot. He ends up. What was that? What was that experience like? Did he plead out? Did he plead not guilty? Did he take a plea? What was the deal?
I wish the process with the interview and all that stuff was as quick as we make it out to be. Like, I went up to where our detectives are housed and did the interview there. We've changed the process since then, and then came back down and did the walkthrough and met with the the county attorney, and the county attorney said, hey, good shoot and all that stuff. But one thing that I actually wrote some notes down, but one thing I wanted to make sure for you folks that haven't been into shooting, that you are going to be one day, because that's how you have to look at it, like, expect it every day. They're going to take your gun at some point, and they may not have a replacement. And I've read a lot of stuff, a lot of literature, and that messes up a lot of people. But if because you're naked, you're right. So I still had my secondary on me, so I still had a gun and I had a million cops, but you still feel kind of naked because you don't have your gun with you. But if you expect that kind of stuff, it's like, I know they're going to take it, and I know there's a chance they may not, the guy who has the backups may not have one. Mm-hmm. So if you know that that's going to be a thing, then it doesn't strike you as hard kind of when it happens. But And oh yeah, one other thing before I actually answer your question. So one other thing is, they ask if you want to call, because my wife was in nursing school at the time and she's studying for their boards, and so she was in class, and they asked if I wanted to call her. So I had to call her from the sergeant phone, not my cell phone, because I dropped it. But we have a plan. So we have like a code phrase, like if I ever call her and say, I have to tell her something that went down. Hey, I have something very important to tell you and I need you to listen. And that is the phrase. And that shuts everything down. So I call her and she's like, hey, sweetie, what's going on? Baby, I have something very important to tell you and I need you to listen. Okay. And told her what happened. And she's like, okay, cool. What's next? And so one of my buddies that she knows drove up and picked her up and brought her back down. But that's a super important thing, that instead of just, calling your spouse or loved one saying, I'm okay, but, if you ask them, have the conversation, like, how do you want this information to come to you? Because it's going to happen one day. It's just like having kind of a code word when you're out and about, off duty and something goes down. Mm-hmm. You have to have that code word. And when that is uttered, the plan goes into effect without any question. But anyway, so I tend to ramble. But yeah, as far as the court process, I wasn't super involved in the court process because Jason and Allison were listed as the victims. And technically in the investigation, I was the suspect that was immediately cleared. But yeah, I wasn't really privy to much of the court process, and they kind of kept me involved. And the original plea that the prosecutors offered this fool was like 10 years. And my guys basically dropped middle fingers, stone cold style, and said, no, that is unacceptable. If you're going to offer a plea, it's 20. That is the plea that we want you to offer, is 20 years. And he ended up taking it.
You mentioned some lessons. What are some of the lessons? Are there other lessons that you learned as a result of this? And also, you mentioned something, too, in your original story to me about issues you still had to be a supervisor over this whole thing. But what are some of the what are some lessons and takeaways you've gotten from this?
The biggest thing is, like I said, is to be prepared for it. And a lot of these things, what's the phrase? I think it was Jeff Cooper, that you're never going to rise to the occasion. You're only going to default to your level of training. Yeah. And, 10,000 reps for mastery. So let's say that you're an average officer in an average department and you have to 50-round qual once a year. And let's say that every year you fail the first qual and pass on the second qual. So over the course of 20 years, if my math is right, that's 2,000 rounds. Mm-hmm. And that's just pulling the trigger on paper. And I can teach anybody to pull the trigger on paper, but what we actually are doing when we're doing the firearms training is we're teaching you how to make a decision. And so you don't actually need to go out there and fire. And I'm not saying that shooting isn't important, because it's an invaluable tool. And the only reason I was able to make a 46-yard shot, I didn't think it was that far at the time. I thought it was like 30 or 35, but they came back and told me later it was 46 yards. The only reason I had been able to do that is because I had put in time at the range. When we were out on the rifle range, we had steel down at down by the targets. And at lunch, I just grab my pistol and go out and plink from 50 and go out and plink from 100. If you can put a pistol round on a steel target at 100, how much confidence do you have in your ability?
Sure.
And so I was, very confident that I didn't even think really about the yardage. It wasn't until they asked me afterwards, but it's that kind of stuff. So you have to have the mechanical ability, but you also have to have the decision-making skills and know, when you're justified in doing something. Run yourself through scenarios, listen to hot traffic in other districts. How would you, especially as a supervisor, how would you run that?
Yeah, for sure.
Debrief people. We had an officer in our department that was involved in, I think, 6 or 7 shootings. And, of course, the media loved him. But I talked to him about all those shootings, and there were some very interesting takeaways. So, it's the mental preparation, I think, is the biggest thing. And then just, you can't count on your department to give you all the training that you need. Read Police Run, read Caliber Police One, the website, and read Caliber Press, and go to the street survival seminars and soak up as much training as you can, because now you start looking at things from different perspectives. A big thing for me was kind of reading the military-based books. That really puts shit in perspective. Like, you think you're having a bad day. At no point in my shooting did I ever have to go through like a 36-hour gun battle and then run a mile behind a tank to get out of a city that was coming down on me. I never had to do that. So that puts things in perspective about how bad of a day you're having. And there's a ton of people out there, Garrett, that are listening to this that have been in way hairier situations than me. And those folks, they debrief them. They talk about them. Sometimes there's a debriefing that comes out, and you keep your eyes open and seek that information out, because now you can put yourself in that situation, and hopefully when these folks are being honest, and they usually are, they tell you about their mistakes. And so you put that in the back of your mind, and hopefully that preparation is enough, because it's hard to think, and taking that deep breath and actually being, a lot of this is a mental game, but being able to be physically fit enough that you're not completely, your heart rate's not at 220, and now you're trying to set a perimeter as a supervisor, or you couldn't get there in the first place because there's a 6-foot wall that you're going to have to jump.
Mm-hmm.
Those things, the mental preparation and the physical preparation, and, taking training seriously and seeking out stuff on your own. And it doesn't have to be expensive, super cool training, although that is fun. Sometimes it's just, on your drive in, telling yourself, okay, today's the day. Where's the shooting going to be? Okay, it's going to be at this intersection. If it's on a traffic stop, how am I going to call people in, and what am I going to do? And so it's that mental prep. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways is, I was ready for it, even though it, definitely puckered me up. I think I was ready for it. I think we ended up doing a pretty damn good job.
Sounds like it. I mean, you brought up my last question to you, which was in hindsight, and which is a gift, right? I mean, it's we can use it to learn. So not at the time necessarily, but in hindsight, do you feel like there were any mistakes you made either before, during, or after?
Yeah, I think there were plenty. Again, the trying to evacuate the rooms. I thought it was a good idea. Looking back on it, I don't know. Like that was a kind of a spur of the moment. But I don't know if I would necessarily change it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it was necessarily the best idea. Like that's just one of those things that you're going to have to trust your gut. And so I think communication in any critical incident, I think communication can always be better. We had an issue, if you listen to the audio, somebody's emergency key kept keying up because the microphone had come off her shoulder. And so she kept trying to grab the mic and get information out, but hit the emergency key, which would block everybody else out for 10 seconds. So, I think that kind of hampered the communication, but I don't know if I really recognized it as much at the time. So I think if I would have recognized that, I would, we could have set stuff up a little bit better and directing people in, because we had people going to a different hotel. So, but damn, man, everything happened so fast that it's, you mentally prepare and physically prepare as best you can, and then you do your best when it comes out. And if you make a mistake and you can correct it. And I've told the people that I work with that I'm probably going to say dumb things on the air. I'm probably there may be a time where I come up with a plan that is not the best plan, and I would really appreciate it if you get on the air and say, hey, how about this? And on the other calls, we've had that. I come up with, hey, we're going to set up here, here, and here. Somebody will get on, hey, Sarge, I'm over here. Let's try and do this, this, and this. And I've said it straight up on the radio. That is a much better plan. We're doing that. I'm coming to you. So that ego has to take a check. But yeah, it's knowing kind of what to expect with these things that, like I said, we don't necessarily teach people to do. Like a lot of the scenarios that, cops run is, you do an active shooter scenario and then you neutralize the threat and then the scenario's over. Well, now what? Now how are you going to put a guard on that guy and start, triaging people? How are you going to bring medical in? Have you figured out where your staging area is going to be, especially if you're the supervisor that's kind of like inside the actual incident? You're the one that's going to be directing people in until somebody of higher rank or smarter than you takes over. And hopefully it's both. And but like I said, the biggest thing for me, the biggest takeaways that I try to pass on to people is figuring out these other things, like knowing what that adrenaline dump is going to do, and that, next time you have to go to the bathroom, it smells like battery acid and looks like Gatorade. That would have surprised the crap out of me had I not read that somewhere. And, had a sergeant who promoted and then has since retired. He texted me, and he was in a gnarly, knockdown, drag out, 3 cops on 1, fighting a guy over a gun in a probation office. And, I remember him telling me that he looked down the barrel of that gun and it was huge. And he ended up basically doing a contact shot on the guy. And he texted me, he's like, "You're going to have nightmares. They will go away. Just let yourself work through it." And again, if he hadn't have told me that might have messed me up, but kind of expecting these things. Oh, I also got the bill for our bad guy for his hospital ride or his ambulance ride to the hospital. Somebody inter-officed it to me and put it on my desk.
Was it made out to you?
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
We've had that happen too.
It had bad guy's name on it, and it was somebody wrote, care of Sergeant Burkmier, and put it on my desk. And I came in, I was only gone for a week, which again, hindsight, don't come back in 3 days. If your department gives you the option, take more time, because I came back way too fast because I had a bunch of new officers and I was a new sergeant, and I thought that I had to be the rock to be back quickly. And I probably should have taken at least another couple days, but yeah, I brought that to my lieutenant. I'm like, it's a good thing that I'm okay with this, because if this would have messed me up more, this may have sent me over the edge.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other lessons is talk to people, talk to your spouse, like let them know what you're going through and your feelings. And I'm fortunate that, my wife, her stepdad was a Phoenix cop for 26 years, and she was a dispatcher, and that's how we met. And she's a nurse now, and she's worked in ICU, and she gets it. But we have these conversations, and I tell her how I'm feeling, and it's, I don't think you're going to impress anybody by holding everything in. If you don't talk about it, that's when stuff starts to play. That's when really, stuff starts to play with your mind, I think. Mm-hmm. I've been fortunate or unfortunate enough to see a lot of bad shit, like I'm sure that you have, and every other cop out there. Everybody has stories, and just going home and pounding a few beers and then trying to go to bed and getting 4 hours of sleep and coming back to work, that's not going to get it done. Like, if you have, trusted people, you can talk to somebody on your team, or, if you have a critical incident stress management team like we do, like, we have to go to those after every shooting. And one of the last deaths we had was like a 5-year-old that they called it in and did it in our briefing, and just talk. That's one of those things that I think that's finally been broken down in law enforcement, that people are more willing to talk, but we're still type A and, hey, nothing bothers me. And that's crap, man. A lot of stuff bothers me. I see a lot of people's faces, but I can get through my day and it doesn't cripple me. Right. You know what I mean? Because I can talk to folks about it, and I can tell them that there's no shame in saying that I'm tired of seeing dead people. I'm sick of it. It sucks. There's a lot of people that died before they should have, for whatever reason, be it, medical issues that they did to themselves or violent crime. And it wears on you, but you can manage it and you can deal with it and you can put it in a box and be healthy with it, instead of just trying to keep it to yourself and then you break one day.
Well, Rick, I think, you talked about the importance of debriefing, and like I mentioned, you're the first in this new kind of style of episode, where that's exactly what I'm hoping we do here, right? We debrief these with people, we talk about them, we find people who are brave enough and strong enough and confident enough to be willing to talk about their experience, so that others who are listening can either do one of two things. They can learn from it for the time for when it comes to be their turn, or they realize that when they went through their experience, they're not alone, right? Yeah. And I think being open and honest, and you approached this whole episode with zero ego, man, and I appreciate you sharing both the wins and the maybe the not quite so wins or the fails of what you can do as a leader, right? And I think going very back to the very beginning of this episode when we talked about the difference between supervision, management, and leadership, you just described a real leader to me there who is not who doesn't bring their ego to work with them, who listens when someone else has a better plan, and who is self-aware enough to realize their participation in their own result, right? So,
yeah.
Thanks for being on. Thanks for sharing that story. It's a good one. It really is, and there's a lot to learn from just talking to you about it. And I hope that other people hearing you talk about it here makes it okay for them to talk. Not on a podcast with thousands of people listening, but at least to their wife, like you said,
yeah.
or their husband, or their squad, or the new guy that just went through something, and they can break down their own wall and go talk to them. I think you do a lot of good service by sharing that, man, and I thank you for being willing to do it with us today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, the whole reason that I kind of started the whole 40 caliber thing with the Instagram was, that I kind of want to do my part. I've seen probably more than some folks, and a lot of folks have seen more than me, but we're not really, kind of talking about, how to prepare for it. And, at least especially that's kind of what we focus on is the physical side, right? It's the, third leading cause of officer deaths is heart attacks. So we're getting that kind of information and being willing to talk about these things. I mean, it's, I don't want to, I didn't email you with the hopes of, oh my God, look at me, I'm so important. I thought that I had something to offer, and hopefully somebody can glean something. So when it's their turn, they do it better. And then they can kind of pass that on to the next people, even if it isn't a podcast 5 years from now. And then a whole bunch of other people can learn. And now our circle just gets bigger. And now in 20 years, how much did we strengthen our community? And that's really what it's all about. That's a legacy. It's, I'm going to be gone from law enforcement in however many years. Nobody's going to remember my name or badge number, but somewhere, maybe 3 generations down, somebody's going to kind of share a story that maybe, some new guys listened to this herd, and then they were able to take it 3 more steps when they're a lieutenant, and they changed the way things are in their entire department. So we're just little cogs, man, trying to make things better.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%, man. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, thank you, Garrett. I really appreciate it.
All right, thanks to Sergeant Rick Burkmier for coming on the show. Really appreciate him willing to talk about that, his openness with it. Obviously, everything's been adjudicated, so there's no confidentiality issues or anything like that. It's been cleared by his PIO, etc. So he's good to go. If you want to follow us, you can check us out on Instagram and Twitter at The Squad Room. If you want to follow Rick, he's on Instagram at 40 Caliber Fitness. 40 Caliber Fitness. You can check out his podcast as well. And if you want to join our mailing list, you could do that from our website, thesquadroom.net, or you can just text The Squad Room, all one word, to 44222, and you can get signed up from the palm of your hand. Now, if you don't want to do any of that, and you don't want to have anything to do with that, or you've already done those things and you're part of this community already, we appreciate that and thank you. But if you want to do something to help support the show, which you can really do, of course, that Audible trial I mentioned at the beginning of the show, but you can also go to iTunes and leave an honest review of the show. Let us know what you think. Help us share it with others. It gets us in front of more people who need to hear this message. Our audience is growing by the day, but it really is important to get good reviews of the show and get that in front of people. So if you found value in this episode or any other episode, please consider going to iTunes or your podcast player of your choice, whether that's Google Play or Stitcher or tune in and leave a review of the show. We would appreciate that very much. Until next time, please take care of each other and stay safe.